Welcome to the Pottery Shop. The Pottery Shop was really important in terms of the building materials that were used to construct La Purisima. There were three main materials that were made here in the Pottery Shop. The first one is my favorite. They're made of different segments that all fit together. There's a wide end and there's a narrow end, which allows them to be linked. Imagine a whole bunch of these connected together, bringing the water from the spring in the hillside down to the Padres fountain. That's how we would have gotten our fresh water here. Today, we usually make water pipes out of perhaps metal or even PVC, but 200 years ago, they were made of clay, and they would have been made here on our kick wheel. That we see here in our pottery shop is our floor tiles. They're rather heavy. This is probably 15 or 20 pounds each. They're square in shape for the most part, though we do have some rectangular ones, and about 2 inches thick. These probably would have been made using a frame or even cut into their current shape. And we walk over them in our mission. We have several different flooring materials, including redwood floors and adobe floors, but our tile floors are also common. The third material that we see here is actually our roof tiles, which are incredibly important for our adobe. If our adobe gets wet, even though it has clay in it, because it's not fired, it will melt again. And that actually happened after the missions were secularized. Our adobe melted when the roof tiles were removed. But our roof tiles, when they get wet, because they've been fired in a kiln, they retain their shape. And so these, even when they're wet, the underside will remain dry, and so will the interior of the mission. Clay was a new material that was introduced to the Chumash when they came here to La Purisima. Prior to coming here, they would have primarily used different kinds of basketry for the same things that we use ceramic dishes for today, as well as 200 years ago here at the mission. When a mission is constructed, the Padres would have looked for the clay deposits that were closest to the mission, and that's where they would have chose to position our pottery shop. Our clay deposits here at La Purisima are most likely in the hillside just behind us here. Our local clay that we find here is actually gray in color, and the reason why we know that is because of the mud swallows that build their nest with it. We can actually see it here in this broken roof tile. If you notice, there is a gray line that goes down the center of it. The outside, however, is that distinctive red color that we know about missions. The reason for that is this gray clay that we find here has iron in it, and when it's heated up to a temperature of approximately 2,000 degrees, which is about how high we have to get it in order to bake our clay, it changes color. Clay from the hillside is then brought into the pottery shop where it's broken up in a vat like this one. A donkey would have been on one end and walked around and around in circles, which would have dragged these stones, causing it to be ground into a fine powder. Once the clay has been ground into a powder, it's then taken to another vat just outside where water is added to it to reintroduce moisture. After the clay was saturated and worked into a moldable consistency, it could have been shaped into our floor tiles, roof tiles, and water pipes. There are several theories about how roof tiles were made, some of which said the thigh could have been used to shape them. When the CCC reconstructed our mission in the 1930s, they used frames like this one in order to get the shape correct for molding the roof tiles. Clay can be pressed out fairly easily when it gets to the right consistency. And once it's been pressed out into a flat, semi-triangular shape, we can put it over a mold to dry. Once a roof tile has been pressed out, the mold can be removed and the clay can be transferred to a mold like this one where it can take shape. The clay will need to dry completely before it can be fired. This can take anywhere from as few as a couple of days to as long as a week. standing just outside of our pottery shop at our Mission Era kiln. Now, clay goes through several different states. We have our wet clay, we have our dried clay, then we also have our bisque-fired clay, which is after our clay goes through the kiln. After that, we can also glaze it in order to make it more decorative and easier to clean. Our roof tiles are what we call bisque-fired. Our roof tiles, once they've been set out to dry, they can be taken to the kiln, where they have to be heated up to about 2,000 degrees and baked or fired for about a day and a half. Now, you may wonder, for a fire that's that hot and lasts that long, what could they have burned here at the Mission? But what's important to remember is that one of our most abundant resources here is actually our longhorn cattle. In 1820, we had about 10,000 cattle here at the Mission. And so one of the things that we could actually do is we could go out and collect the cow patties that would have been littered everywhere and are mostly made of grass, which is the primary food source of our cattle. If we leave these to dry, they make a hot, hot fuel. With enough of these, we could create a fire that would be enough to heat our kiln to 2,000 degrees and last for a day and a half to fire all of those roof tiles that are needed to cover and protect our adobe walls.